This week on To the Contrary.
First, Washington spars as women and children pour over the southern border. Then, are homophobia and sex discrimination the same thing? Behind the headlines, educating women as the key to ending global poverty.
Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, politics and the crisis on the border.
President Obama, Texas Governor Rick Perry, and Republicans in Congress agree there's a humanitarian crisis at our border, but there's no agreement on how to address it. That, as unprecedented numbers of mothers, young children, and teen girls continue to flood our southern border. The president also faces criticism for not visiting the border during his trip this week to Texas. After meeting with Governor Perry, the president laid down a challenge to congressional Republicans that, as he's asking them for $3.7 billion to house, feed, and process the 50,000-plus mothers and children.
What I emphasized to the governor was the problem here is not a major disagreement around the actions that could be helpful in dealing with the problem. The challenge is Congress prepared to act, to put the resources in place to get this done?
But Republicans place the blame for the deluge on the president for, quote, promising amnesty, end quote, in the words of Texas Senator Ted Cruz, and say the president should secure the border and stop the flow of illegal entrants first. The children left Central America mainly to escape gang violence and sex trafficking or to be reunited with family in the U.S. legally or illegally. The United Nations is asking the government to treat the children as refugees fleeing violence.
So, Patricia Sosa, is the president right? Is Congress more interested in playing politics than fixing the situation?
Oh, yes, I agree with President Obama. I think the Obama administration has put forward a very reasonable package, and the Republicans are trying to blame him for a problem, as you said earlier, has been caused by the gangs in Central America and actually by a law signed by President Bush in 2008.
I don't think it's fair to put all the blame on Republicans. At an Appropriations Committee hearing this week, even Senate Democrats sounded pretty skeptical of the $3.7 billion the president was asking for.
Bonnie, the president's balanced approach is what is needed given Republican backlash and Democratic compassion.
Well, and what we're seeing is a lot of people looking toward 2014 and 2016. Let's parse this issue out from the larger immigration debate and deal with it that way.
Well, first of all, I want to get to the law that you mentioned, the 2008 law. The law was written to deal with young, predominantly girls who had been sex trafficked or who were attempted to be sex trafficked into the country. Why is it being applied to a situation where you have mass migration? It's not mass sex trafficking. What's going on?
Let me just say a couple of comments about the overall situation. I mean, I think this is a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the children that are living in these circumstances and the parents that have no choice but to send their kids by themselves to a border situation and they don't know what's going to happen. But most importantly, it's a tragedy of the political system in which we have an impasse. You're right. When you're dealing with the crisis of this nation, where you have thousands of children coming to your border, as a government, you have to have the resources, both financial and legally, to handle a situation. And I think that's what the Obama administration has put forward, a package that deals with the children and the shelter that they need, and asking for discretion on the laws so they're able to increase the number of judges so they can process these kids faster, and that they can handle the situation in a way that is humane, meet the standards of the United States and the American people that believes these children should be treated humanely, and the international standards.
So, well, but Patrice, what about, and welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
What about viewing this law, using this law? Why can't Congress or the president just say, this is not about sex trafficking, this law doesn't apply, therefore they go back home. They just, they get turned away. We are allowing busloads that come to the border in the San Diego area to cross into the United States. Why not turn them around?
She did refer to this loophole from 2008, and that just deals with people from children from Central America. In the other migrants from Mexico and from Canada, they are turned away. And so I think right now what we're seeing is that these children are not being processed fast enough, and any sort of legislation like this is meant to process them faster. But there's more than just that going on here. What we need to do is actually stem or stop this migration. This migration is really more tied toward what President Obama did back in 2011 with his kind of DACA Act, which actually allowed for young people to be brought in, or children to be brought, once they were brought to the borders, that they could actually stay here. And that's what then you have happened is in Central America, there's misinformation about this law. And so all of a sudden it's, well, things are bad right now, and you can come to the United States. Once your children get here, they can stay. And that's a lot of misinformation that we need to change. But we're cleaning up after President Obama right now.
The UN Commission has already debunked what you just said. They have already shown that the reason you're having the spike now is that these transnational drug cartels have literally taken over these collapsed states. Or else, if the question was, Obama's drawing these people, when they would have come was at the height of the DREAM Act surge that we kept talking about. We kept trying to get them to pass the DREAM Act. It's an unpleasant coincidence. But if you look at the third party, independent observers, then you've got to look at what they say is causing it, not at Republican or Democratic speculation.
Okay, but isn't the general view, and whether this is a function of U.S. messaging or not, or their own government messaging, isn't the general view, and why else would a mother take a 6-year-old with her or send a 9-year-old by herself? And what we're really seeing here, by the way, there are plenty of teen boys who always cross illegally into the United States. What we're seeing is mothers with young children and surges of teen girls who are obviously more likely to get raped, get sex trafficked, than the boys are.
And what we're seeing are smugglers who indeed have passed some of the rumors that you just described. They really are saying, if you get there, you're home free.
And aren't they sort of right? The Wall Street Journal had an article that said 46% of them end up staying here, even when they are processed. So they're half right on that.
And the president notes that and has asked for, and we don't know what this means, flexibility, because he recognizes that once you get here, it's very hard for these children to come back. These children are coming, and I must say we have a large number of them in my district and in this region, because this region has a predominance of Salvadorians, Hondurans, Guatemalans. They're coming because they have relatives here. If we had done immigration reform, we would not be having this crisis.
And
Francesca.
So Secretary of State Jay Johnson, not Secretary of State, Homeland Security, Jay Johnson actually testified before Congress to the point that you're making before. The smugglers are telling these parents that if you get here by the end of the summer, you get here right now, then you will be covered under DACA, under amnesty, and that is part of the reason why Obama's request for $3.7 billion includes $5 million to run media campaigns in these Central American countries to make it very clear that that is not true and that you can't come here because of those programs. However, if people did not think that that was true, if those programs did not exist, then Obama would not have to be spending $5 million to debunk those myths.
Well, and what about the $3.7 million? I must say, we talked about $1 billion rather. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. On the show as well, but when it was $1 billion or $2 billion, it keeps getting bigger and bigger. Why is it that Congress can come up with this money now when it couldn't have a month or two ago? I mean, it's borrowed money, right? But secondly, why is it that and how do the people here, including the illegal immigrants who are here, who don't have housing, who don't have food, who don't have jobs, feel about that money going to help more people who are illegally entering and gaming the system?
You really call the American people short if you think that people, even the poorest people, for example, in my own district, would say, look, government isn't giving me anything, so who cares what happens to these people? There's an American spirit that says, if you see this kind of crisis, do something about that. I haven't seen that backlash.
Eleanor, I've been watching them on
television.
television.
Who I see this backlash from is not people who also need money. I see this backlash from the far right.
And I have to say this, Moni. This is, the UN have said it, that these countries are in warlike situations. The surges, as we know, are coming from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. They're escaping, their refugee situation is no different from the refugee situation in Syria.
But when you look at the numbers, thank you, when you look at the numbers at the U.S. patrol border, you can see a precipitous incline from 2011 in the number of undocumented, unaccompanied children coming to this country. It's not, as you said, a coincidence. It's actually driven by the president's policies. The backlash that we're seeing is a result of resentment among Americans that, some people are not being taken care of. It's not just segmented to a one part of the party or one party.
You are seeing these same increases in all the bordering countries. There's been a 700% increase in Nicaragua,
Mexico.
A lot of that reason, though, is because they're not making.
How do you account for that? What are their
Actually, I do have a response to that. A lot of the reason, and this was at the same testimony I referenced before, is because they try to come to the U.S., but the journey's too tough and it's too long, so they end up staying in those countries. And that was actually government officials who said that.
They may want to head to Panama, where I was late last year, because the unemployment rate there is 2% because of.
And
I just heard somebody give a reason that she cannot document. You don't know why they stay in those countries. If you are fleeing and you get to safe harbor, you are so glad to be there.
No, I'm not the one who's coming up with that reason.
Wait, nobody can hear when you're both talking at the same time.
Sorry, government officials actually said that during testimony before the Senate Appropriations Committee this week. That is where I got that information from.
All right. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie Urbay or at To The Contrary. From immigration to gay rights.
Is discrimination based on sexual orientation the same as discrimination based on gender? A Catholic school music teacher in Georgia says yes. Flint Dollar was fired after announcing his plans to marry another man. The school argues same-sex marriage goes against church doctrine. There is no federal or Georgia state law that bars an employer from hiring or firing a person based on sexual preference. But Dollar's lawyer argues getting fired for not conforming to traditional gender stereotypes violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Title VII bars discrimination on the basis of sex. The point's been argued before and mostly dismissed, except for a case this past April that raised the hopes of gay rights advocates. A judge in Washington, D.C. allowed an employee from the Library of Congress to sue his supervisor for penalizing him for being gay. He argued that female co-workers, also sharing an interest in men, were not subject to the same harassment. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, with whom Dollar has filed a complaint, also says gender stereotyping is a form of discrimination based on sex.
So is that right, Congresswoman Norton and former EEOC member Norton, Holmes Norton?
I was surprised but pleased that a judge here in the District of Columbia interpreted the word sex as it is written in the statute. On the other side, it is clearly the case when the statute was passed, if you look at the hearings, nobody ever mentioned sexual orientation. Let me caution you about this. When a court interprets a statute, they have to interpret the words. Interpreting the words, it seems to me that judge is on solid ground.
Agree?
Well,
Disagree?
I actually think that we can find more common ground here. I would say that I think it's actually kind of dangerous, though, to conflate the two things with sex and to say gender discrimination is the same exact thing, because the Supreme Court ruling, at least my interpretation of it, would say that religious organizations can say that they don't have to hire you based on your what's the sexual orientation, I suppose, but they can't do that based on your race or your sex. So that conflating the two might actually be a problem here.
Well, a problem, I'm not clear. Problem for whom?
A problem, well, a problem for the churches, first of all, but I certainly think a problem
for the churches in terms of whom they hire and fire.
Yes, but also I think, let's say this ends up in court.
But how?
Well, but let's also say that for the people who want churches not to be able to discriminate based on your sexual orientation, let's say that this goes to court and it goes the wrong way for them. They say that that's not what it was originally meant to say or meant to be. That's why I'm saying it could be dangerous for both parties to go at it from that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see this country treating sexual orientation the way we treat race. And obviously that's a legal scheme that will get you there. But I agree with Francesca. I don't think you're in solid ground. I mean, there is federal legislation in Congress dealing with issues of sexual orientation and discrimination. Unfortunately, it took a turn in the wrong direction because they want to exempt religious institutions with the Holy Body case. Am I getting the right name of the
Hobby Lobby?
Hobby Lobby case. They're quite concerned because now, you know, these corporations have certain rights and religious institutions could claim the same. But again, I think it's going in the right direction.
Well, and religious institutions have always had an exemption under the Civil Rights Act. I think what we need to do is, of course, no one should be discriminated against. That's the bottom line. But now we also have to remember religious freedom in this country. And religious organizations, to be able to advance their own mission, should have a reasonable expectation of the freedom to be able to do what they need to do. And that whatever that looks like, if in terms of, I mean, specifically looking case by case at this case, we're talking about someone who was a teacher and who openly then shared a value that was in conflict with the mission and the values of what the school was trying to do.
But he wasn't teaching it.
He wasn't teaching it, but by being in a position of leadership, he was demonstrating a certain lifestyle to the students that the school is trying to...
Again, that's exactly what we're trying to eliminate, like the way we have eliminated race discrimination, isn't it? You can never justify race discrimination in this country. Well, we want to get in the same place in terms of sexual orientation. We're obviously not there
sexual
yet.
orientation and race are very, very different. Because doctrine of the church says that homosexuality is a sin. And so there's a very...
Francesca, sexual orientation is something you have no control.
No, but homosexuality
this is a difficult
within
case.
the church.
This is a difficult case because he's teaching in a Catholic institution. It's his private life, and if you look at the law generally, that can't come into the workplace. But and this is why this is such a difficult issue. If Catholic doctrine, if he is teaching Catholic doctrine, and Catholic doctrine says you have to live that doctrine, he could argue that he is not living the doctrine. By the way, he's probably Catholic. And this once you get into religion and sexual orientation, you are into new territory. That's the reason the president has had to, or is almost surely going to withdraw his executive order, because the courts are so unclear now. And this is one of the areas, and I agree with you, most of the time, race and sexual orientation, there's no difference. Here, I think there's enough of a difference so that the law has to be peeled out, and we have to know what we're talking about.
But essentially, what's going on here, and I support gay marriage, I support gay rights. I'm in my own Never Land on a lot of issues, and one of them is, gay people. There's no difference between gay and straight people, and if you have a problem with that, why aren't you focusing on something that's really important in the world? But having said that, it's pretty clear to me that the gay rights lobby, having lost in Congress, is trying to use a law that you yourself said was passed to help women. And quite frankly, at this point in time, I would say that the LGBTQ community has made much greater progress towards civil rights than women have in this country. It's still okay to discriminate against women in many circles in this country. It's still okay
to discriminate against the LGBTQ community too.
But not as much. I mean, it's you get called on the carpet more.
Women are covered under Title VII. They are not. I don't. Those are not the comparisons.
I'm talking culturally. Culturally, more Americans a majority of Americans are in favor of equal treatment and gay marriage.
And for women, too.
Well,
even more so for women.
But see, it has not played out. I think it's still okay for male CEOs, male managers to discriminate against women on the job, where it's not culturally. I'm not talking about the law right now. I'm talking culturally. And so on some level, I feel like the LGBTQ should go out and do the same lobbying they did on gay marriage, where they're clearly winning that issue, and history is on their side, and it should be, but they should also get a federal law passed using that same momentum that protects them on the job.
Yeah, well, they've had in the Employment Non-Discrimination Act since almost the beginning of time, and the majority of the American people, in fact, I think it's up to almost 90%, say that there should be no discrimination in employment against gays, but they've gotten nowhere. And they've done the best job of lobbying I have ever seen of any group. Okay. Women, blacks, Hispanics, they know how to lobby.
All right, we got to move on. Behind the headlines, teach a woman to fish as opposed to a man, and everyone eats for a lifetime. That's the lesson Ritu Sharma is teaching in her new book. Her goal is to motivate people into action to fight poverty worldwide.
Look how far we've come, where millions of people are now speaking out because of what happened to the Nigerian girls. It has been a monumental shift that's occurred. And what Women Thrive is trying to do now is to take that shift in awareness and turn it into a shift in action.
In her book, Ritu Sharma explores how women are breaking cycles of poverty by becoming self-sufficient. The two most obvious barriers women face overseas are violence and money. Studies show women who've experienced violence are on average less successful financially than those who have not. And the reverse is also true.
When women have money and they have their own resources, the rates of violence against them go down. So money helps reduce violence. Reducing violence helps women get money. Those two things are two sides of the same coin, and we need to address them together.
If you want to know what you can do to help impoverished women overseas, Sharma has an answer. Get involved politically. She praises the U.S. government for its contributions in making this happen for women and girls.
Americans feel that our government is just ineffective. It can't do anything right. If it does something, that's going to be the wrong thing. But the truth is that our U.S. government can and is, in a lot of cases, doing the right thing and doing it well. But that's not what we hear about in the news.
Social media is a great way to express your feelings about helping these women. But Sharma says letters to members of Congress help too.
One heartfelt, handwritten note from an American to their congressman saying, hey, look, I care about women and girls. I would really like for you to do something about it. That would give us the lift that we need here in Washington to actually get action from Congress and the White House.
Sharma understands Americans first want to solve problems here in the U.S., but she says we spend a lot less on foreign aid than most people realize, less than half of 1% of the federal budget.
We could probably afford to spend 0.7% instead of half of 1%, and even that would make a huge difference.
Sharma learned what it was like to live on $1 a day in Sri Lanka. She points out small amounts of money go a long way in helping women overseas. In fact, Women Thrive is pushing Congress to provide foreign assistance in smaller amounts, micro-grants. Sharma has seen their impact firsthand with a subsistence farmer in Burkina Faso.
I got together with some friends and we raised about $1,000 and sent it to her local women's association. They started a soap making business, and I went back last year, and she has just transformed the whole life of that village with $1,000.
Sharma also wants to see women make a difference by becoming more conscientious shoppers and asking store workers about their employers' ethical trade policies.
Once they start hearing from women on their store floors, it will start bubbling up and bubbling up and bubbling up, and pretty soon those CEOs are going to be saying, oh my God, we better get an ethical trade policy.
So, Patrice, do you think it's possible, as Ritu Sharma would like to do, to get women more conscious in their consumer choices to help women overseas?
I think it's a nice idea, but I think it's unrealistic, especially women who tend to be already set in their ways. Among millennials, though, we see that they're very much engaged and committed to what they're buying and linking the two. I do like it with this entire book that it really shows that poverty alleviation and development is really about giving the individual the right to own their future and not just throwing empty government dollars at problems.
All right, terrific way to end the show. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. Whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.
She said, no, but what I like about her is when it's teaching, it's like